inspires a man whose resume includes a bachelor's degree from Caltech, Fulbright Fellowship, PhD from Harvard, NASA scientist, astronaut, pilot, and former United States Senator, just for starters? For New Mexico native Harrison Hagen Jack Schmitt, growing up in Silver City offered the best of all possible worlds. Open spaces lured the boy who loved to explore them. Soon he was literally following in the footsteps of his geologist father, not realizing the length and diversity of the path that lay before him.
My father was what is generally called an economic geologist, consulting economic geologist. And so I had exposure to geology at a very young age, and actually, as far back as I can remember, was a field assistant for him. And that varied. In my younger days, it was just carrying samples. As I got older, I was his surveyor. And so I spent a lot of time, summers mostly, and weekends, working in that general field or discipline of science, and it was an obvious thing to get very interested in.
When he was growing up, Schmitt's parents encouraged him to try many things and instilled in him a love of education and reading, particularly history.
History had always interested me, and I strongly recommend that to any student. No matter what field you're going into, make sure that you get all the history you can possibly assimilate. Learning is probably one of the most exciting things that I think anybody can do. Using your brain and expanding its use and knowledge that's contained within it, I find it extraordinarily exciting.
During his senior year at Weston High School, applying for college had to be sandwiched in between Schmitt's many school projects.
When I was a senior in high school, I was probably doing too many different things, as well as trying to maintain my grades and take the examinations necessary to go into colleges. I didn't know how tough it was to get into Caltech, and so I was very fortunate that that very year Caltech began to look at New Mexico as a source of students where they had not looked at New Mexico before.
Caltech proved to be a launch pad for several new opportunities for Schmitt. Geology professor Ian Campbell kept encouraging him to apply for the Fulbright Fellowship for overseas graduate study.
I think the advice I would give to faculty is to be persistent with students that you think would benefit from an experience in a foreign university and in a foreign circumstance. For the students, the most important thing, I think, is to make sure that you and your advisors and other faculty members know each other, that you really do spend time together so that when they write a letter of recommendation, it reads as if they really know who you are and are writing on behalf of somebody that they really can represent as being qualified for the position. Going to Oslo, Norway with a whole bunch of other college students was a whole new experience for me.
Back in the U.S., Schmitt enrolled at Harvard to pursue a PhD in geology.
Harvard was a fairly normal path in geology in those days, from Caltech to Harvard. When I finally received my PhD, taking far too long to do that, and a piece of advice to all students is, and to faculty, don't let your students take 6 years to get an advanced degree.
Following his graduation in 1964, Schmitt joined the U.S. Geological Survey and was assigned to the Astrogeology Center in Flagstaff, Arizona, developing geological field techniques that would be used by the Apollo crews.
NASA and the National Academy of Sciences asked for volunteers for the Scientist Astronaut program. And I thought about 10 seconds and raised my hand and said, yes, I would like to volunteer, not really knowing what I was volunteering to do. My father had thought I might be throwing away all this education that I had gotten. I think secretly he wanted me to go into business with him. My mother, on the other hand, was probably of mixed feelings. I think, like all mothers, she was very much concerned about the risk of spaceflight. Her attitude was, and I'm really quoting, says, "You boys can do what you want, but I don't have to watch."
The next 10 years were a very heady time for Schmitt and the others. NASA was a young, dynamic organization, anxious to meet President Kennedy's challenge to place men on the moon and return them safely to Earth before the end of the decade. First on Schmitt's agenda was flight school. He learned to fly jets through the Air Force and helicopters with the Navy. Training took on other forms as well. Survival training in the jungles of Panama, studying geology at field locations around the country, learning how to document samples. Because Schmitt was the only geologist in the astronaut corps, he became the first of the scientist astronauts to receive a crew assignment. Schmitt concurred with all the NASA decision-makers, saying, "I just thought going to the moon would be a good idea."
The basically 10 years that I spent as an astronaut was a huge experience, a high most of the time, a terribly exciting time, both in the training and in the actual event of going to the moon. When you finally are in the rocket and it begins to rumble and vibrate and you know you're headed somewhere, you hope it's where everybody planned to take you, that starts to get your attention. And for the next 13 days, it was one continuous, very heady experience.
Schmitt remained active in NASA for 3 years after the moon flight, documenting the Apollo geologic results and organizing NASA's Energy Program Office. But his other interests were gaining momentum.
I had always been interested in politics from the time I can remember, and once the astronaut experience really was over and I knew I was not going to have an opportunity to fly in space again, at least for 10 or 15 years, then I began to look seriously at going into politics.
As a senator from New Mexico from 1977 through 1982, Schmitt served on the Commerce, Banking, Appropriations, Intelligence, and Ethics committees. And during his final 2 years, he chaired the Science, Technology, and Space Subcommittee, as well as the Appropriations Subcommittee on Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education. Today, our man on the moon juggles an active consulting, speaking, and writing career. Schmitt serves on several private and corporate boards, as well as founder and chair of Interloon, Intimars Initiative and Helium-3 Fusion Power. Schmitt travels to all parts of the globe, but still calls New Mexico home. He and his wife Teresa live in Albuquerque, where he is a familiar face at venues such as the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science. Along the way, he's received numerous honors and awards for his years of public service and commitment to excellence in every project he tackles. Most recently, the U.S. State Department, which administers the Fulbright Fellowship Program, created a leadership award in his name and honored the first 2 recipients in July 2003. All of New Mexico can be proud of Jack Schmitt's many accomplishments. He saw opportunities and wasn't afraid to reach out and grab the brass ring. He feels that sharing the stage with all of you today is an honor too, as you are ready to reach for your own brass rings.
The value of your educational experience is going to be entirely up to you. You really are building the foundation for whatever future you're going to have, and what you get out of it is going to be what you put into it. You just can't anticipate what those opportunities are going to be. I had no idea of the opportunities that would be open to me as I went forward in my career. But fortunately, I had, because of the efforts of others and the encouragements of others, had built a foundation of education that I could use and expand upon as I went into those new careers.